All right, welcome in. Here we go. We are around the table for now and next, and we've got our comms and strategy team. Our cast is here: Lindsay, Broadhead, Bob, Reid, Anne-Marie, Aikins, and lots of fun stuff to talk about this week. I do want to get to Bob. You want to talk about the Junos, and I thought it was kind of an interesting take on where our national music awards is at. And I'm curious to see what you guys thought about, the prime minister showing up and who got more ink, the prime minister or Joni Mitchell. But we'll get to that. But one of the things that fascinated me on the weekend was the NDP leadership, and this was, long in the works. We saw it coming for months and months when they decided that Jagmeet Singh was going to step down after the last election, and then really the question, Bob, became, what is the NDP? Not so much who should lead the NDP, but what is the party? And there was this whole sort of messaging strategy, I thought, that played out in real life in terms of, are you the party that is sort of the conscious of Canadians, or are you the party that's actually going to have some power, if not gain government? And it was a really interesting academic conversation. They came to a conclusion on the weekend by electing or selecting Avi Lewis. But I didn't think I'd seen that so obviously in terms of what is it we're all about here conversation as far as a political party was concerned with the backdrop of a leadership campaign before.
I was going to say, you're the guy who was fascinated by the NDP leadership. No, there's been a lot of soul searching going on, and rightly so. I mean, the party's a mess, right? It's broke. They've got 6 seats in the entire country, trying to come up with a new leader and a clear compass sense of who they are and where they're going. I think Avi Lewis has a very clear sense of direction on what he wants the party to be, and frankly, it's pretty radical. It's very radical. How that is going to gel with the membership of the NDP across the country, I think it's going to be a tall order. We're already seeing the Saskatchewan and Alberta provincial parties want nothing to do with him because he's so hard against fossil fuels and pipelines and oil and gas development. He seems to be trying to tap into sort of the Poilievre-esque frustration or articulation of the frustration that's out there. We heard this from Poilievre for so long that Canada's broken and the Canadian promise isn't accessible anymore. There are a lot of shades of that in what Lewis is talking about, but it's more pointed at corporate interests dominate everything, and they are the ones who are screwing you over. And don't worry, we're going to tax the hell out of them to make things right again. So it's kind of on that same thread of frustration and not being able to get a fair shake and affordability issues with this talk of public grocery stores. So there's to your point, Dave, there's a lot of ideas being thrown around there, most of which, as I see them, are quite radical. And Lewis is comfortable in heading in that direction, but will his members be comfortable in going as far as he wants to?
Yeah, Lindsay, the interesting thing for me over the weekend was when this was all going on, it was sort of a flash in the news. Avi Lewis wins on the first ballot. Oh, by the way, they spent their entire weekend talking about all kinds of other issues that had more to do with pronouns and who was up next at the microphone to ask the questions and all of those sorts of things. And it seemed to me that all of these other issues, this internal bickering, overtook the message of, we have a new leader and we're prepared to take on Carney and Poilievre in the House of Commons.
I think that's really an astute observation, and maybe the one that is the most lingering and lasting. He did win on the first ballot, but it was in the low 50s. So this wasn't a resounding call for leadership. And I think sometimes it's good when second and third ballots are battled out, because then you actually have to get to the brass tacks of what the issues are. I'm not dumbfounded, because I think the NDP have been struggling in many corners of the country, and in different makeups. Like the Liberal Party, like the PC Party, it doesn't look the same depending on where you look at it in different corners of the country. And this was an opportunity for it to coalesce and at least come out of the convention with salient messages, or something that is pointed, that could be consistent, and that folks could hang on to. I certainly haven't picked up that. And getting to Bob's comments about its radical nature, radical or not, I think it's just completely out of step and out of touch with the national conversation right now, right? One where we need to unify, one where we need to make money in the most simple of terms. Our country does not make money. One where jobs need to be secured, one where we have very real threats coming at us from different points of the globe, both physical threats and intellectual threats. And those are the issues that matter. Yes, food costs matter. Of course, those are all top of mind in our communities. But at the end of the day, you can't solve that with this kind of pontificating from on high and arguing from within. So I just see, no crystal ball formula or predictions here, but it's hard to imagine that without some intense soul searching and, frankly, as I said, coalescing a message, that this government's going to have any positive impact moving forward, and therefore not a huge marked impact on the Tory numbers or the Liberal numbers, and that hurts the Tories, as we know.
A few weeks ago, Anne-Marie, we were talking about, the efficacy of the message versus the messenger, that if, we had put the Davos speech in the mouth of Justin Trudeau, it never would have resonated the same way it did when it came out of Mark Carney. I begin to wonder if it's not the same thing for the NDP right now, particularly, Avi Lewis trying to harken back to Tommy Douglas, et cetera. It just doesn't, it's great to be swinging for the fences. But Wab Kinew, the NDP premier in Manitoba, put it rather bluntly, the best way to get ahead is to win. I mean, he pretty much said, if you're actually going to do anything, make sure you win first and foremost.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I really struggled with this topic because I think you said it, Dave. No, we weren't really paying attention to it because they have kind of become irrelevant, and that saddens me, because I am a firm believer the stronger our opposition parties are, the healthier democracy is. Whatever level of government you're talking about, we really need people to they hold strong oppositions hold our government to account. They often speak for the people. And I don't think electing Avi Lewis is going to kind of do that. He comes from a very well-known family, married to a well-known author, considered, his roots are very much in he speaks to his roots, but he doesn't speak, I think, for average Canadians who are afraid about their jobs and paying their bills and buying groceries. And I just don't think he's speaking that language. And they really haven't learned, I think, from what, as Lindsay said, that what Canadians are worried about right now. And that's why we elected Mark Carney, because of his centrist, his safer, his his business acumen and that sort of thing. And so I don't think this is going to signal, for a couple of reasons. Wab Kinew kind of, that I thought right out of the gate, they don't even know who they are yet. And that's sad. And number two was his refusal to run for one of the local by-elections in Toronto. There's 3. He's refusing. He says now's not the time, and he talks a good explanation about why he's not doing it now. But everyone knows why he's not running is because he doesn't believe he can get elected, and that is a killer for any new leader of a party if you can't get elected. I just don't see much success. It doesn't give me hope for the NDP in a strong opposition.
Well, again, Bob, you go back to the comms messaging. I mean, you want to be the leader, but you don't want to be sitting in the House of Commons. You don't want to run for a seat in a by-election. And the press now is that maybe he should be putting his name in the hat to run when Nate Erskine-Smith steps aside and runs provincially. So there will be an opportunity for him in Toronto. It's familiar political stomping ground for him. But it just the whole message around that, plus, to your point, this divergence of brand between the provinces and the federal party. I thought it was interesting to hear. I don't know how many times I heard over the weekend, the Prairie New Democrats. This had become a brand as opposed to, up until recently, if you were a New Democrat in Atlantic Canada, you were a New Democrat in British Columbia. That has really split right across the country.
And that's the reality he's dealing with. It's a very fractured party. And it's going to be a huge communications challenge, I think, in finding the messaging that will resonate far enough and wide enough and consistently enough to really get them back on the rails. Because right now it seems to be a mishmash of I keep using the word radical, but I can't think of a better one. Ideas that, to Lindsay's point, I think are out of step with where most Canadians are at. Justin Trudeau was big on principle and virtue signaling. A lot of people called it, and rightly so to a big degree. And a lot of that stuff just didn't wash. And I'm hearing a lot of the same kinds of things from Avi Lewis. And it makes me sort of shake my head and say, that playbook's been tried and it fell apart. So you really need to take a different tack here, and maybe check some of those more fringy commitments at the door for a while you coalesce, while you try and build a base that is more substantive than this jigsaw puzzle that they've got right now.
Well, and just to sort of make the point on the messy messaging and confusion around it, there's a post on social media, and they're pointing out that one of the women on the floor got up to the mic and talked about defunding the Vancouver Rape Crisis Relief because it wouldn't admit men. I don't know where to go with that, but that was the tone and the quality of what qualified as debate and discussion. But to your point, Lindsay, it'll be curious to see whose head is above water when all this is said and done. I'm of two minds on the Air Canada story around Michael Rousseau. When it first came out and he made his comments after the LaGuardia crash and 2 pilots were killed, I thought, boy, he just put a rake out in front of himself, Lindsay, not speaking French again. It's not the first time he's failed to do so. And then I heard, he was being summoned to Ottawa by a Commons committee and they wanted answers, et cetera. And I thought, okay, well, that's a bit of an oversight, an overstretch, that we're overreacting to it. But the more I get into it, the more I'm thinking, man, what the hell were you thinking? And who was advising him on a comms level? Either it's bad advice or he was ignoring it. Because to be in that job as long as he was, to be saying that he's been taking French lessons for as long as he was, and can't say 3 lines of condolence in French to the family of the killed pilot. My French is lousy, but I would have made an effort.
That's right. Because, well, first of all, if Air Canada needs any comms counsel, I know a team of 3 who would be very willing to support them in their efforts. One of the most important underlying things for crisis comms, and it's very hard to teach, is tone. And how you connect with that audience, especially in the first moment, especially after someone's died. And the consensus here is that he missed the boat, no matter how you square this circle. Oftentimes I go back to one particular case study when I'm uncertain of where to fall on an issue. And it's the Lac Mégantic crash that happened many years ago in Sherbrooke, Quebec, I believe, close to Sherbrooke, Quebec. And a CEO, an English-speaking CEO, right out of central casting for Middle America, came up to Quebec, and first of all, he arrived days late. This was one of these cases honestly, Dave, I studied, followed it time by time by time. I was at that point in my career where I had the luxury of like, okay, I'm going to go deep and nerdy on this case. And he came up late. He was completely tone deaf to local issues. He hadn't been briefed on what mattered to the community. He didn't appreciate, he certainly didn't speak French, but he didn't appreciate, and this was the key to it, that cultural language nuance. And it was just riddled with error after error after error. And I encourage anyone and everyone to study that case, because if you want to learn about social media, if you want to learn about kind of traditional media, if you want to learn about anything, even though it's very dated in terms of tools we have today, I think so many lessons creep up from it. And that's where I went to for this particular question of didn't he do it right? And it comes down to that, is that he wasn't there for a week as the leader of Air Canada. He represents a brand that should have known better, and he should have performed higher. And that's as do I like that he was called to the principal's office in Ottawa? Do I like that all played out on media? Do I think it was a little tacky? Like, all of those things are equally cringy. But at the end of the day, he should have done better, and a brand like Air Canada should have stepped higher, and they know it.
Well, and here's the problem: it is that if they did know it, they were willfully ignorant then, Anne-Marie, because this is not something new. Because we heard before in his apology, or the case maybe when he didn't speak French, I'm not good at it. Okay, then get good at it, or at least make the effort. And apparently the effort was being made. So his team was not aware that he couldn't speak the language, that he couldn't fumble through, at least make the effort.
Yeah, I think I had a lot of thoughts came to mind. I was tempted to write about it, but the one I don't like the political overreach, as you guys have stated. They privatized Air Canada, but they did agree to the principle of being adhering to the two official languages, and but I still don't like the political overreach into the boardroom, and because that sets a dangerous precedent. But I kind of dug behind of who does provide the comms leadership, and it could have been an absolute failure to recognize the risks. Could have been, or it could have been that they a failure to adhere or agree to the comms advice. And that's happened to me lots of times before. But they have kind of two leaders, and the very top of it is in Air Canada. Her background, she covers HR and communications, which is odd, I think, in the first place. And ironically, part of her title is that she is the official champion of official languages. So that's the top. The next kind of chief for just for comms is also a background in HR, and both of those individuals are French. So my guess is they either missed the boat, or they really did give him advice that he failed to recognize or to acknowledge or anything like that. But Lindsay is right on the money with the tone. I have worked for leaders, won't say who are either they're just incapable of adopting a tone of super compassionate under circumstances like that. And I remember many, many times for different, not just Metrolinx, but for other organizations I worked with that had tragedies that they had to communicate about. And the leaders were just recognized in themselves that they were incapable of performing during very tragic circumstances. whatever, for whatever reason. And we recognize that. And I would be the person that would be speaking under those kind of circumstances. So they just made a wrong choice. Headline, they had subtext or whatever it's called underneath in the video. But why would you choose a video as your format to put out your statement from your CEO? Put it out in English and French, and then the person on camera, if they're not capable of adopting the correct tone and speak in both official languages, is not the CEO. That's just the way it is. He promised he would become bilingual when he was hired as the CEO, and he failed to do that. So I have to put it also on the board. So the comms people and the board did not, they continued to give him his $12 million in bonuses every year, in spite of the fact he failed to become bilingual. The last thing I want to say is I don't feel sorry for him. He has retired with a full pension because he was there for 20 years, and his salary was $12 million a year. He walks away with all kinds of shares of Air Canada and a millionaire. So I don't think we have to feel sorry for him. He made a big, colossal mistake at the end of his career, and he walked away, and he's actually still hasn't walked away. He's not going to walk away for months as yet, a millionaire. So I don't feel sorry for him.
Well, Emery makes a good point around this, though, Bob. It's first, if we've got HR folks who are involved in comms, that completely changes the communications dynamic just based on if you are first in HR, then comms, it's a different thing. But second is that it's safe to assume that the folks who are leading the comms strategy, if not the HR strategy, had the blessing of the CEO. So it was like drinking your own bathwater almost. If you look at this, it was bound to fail.
Yeah, it was either incompetence or intransigence on the part of the CEO. So he either got bad advice or he got good advice that he refused to take. And we've seen how this played out. It's astonishing to me that nobody in the communications branch said, we can't put out a unilingual statement here. We never do that. Anytime we put out a statement on anything, it's translated into French and they both go out at the same time. And, it's one thing, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. His French presumably is terrible. And I think we can assume that if there was a discussion about, can you at least try and get a few words out? If he flatly refused and said, no, I'm going to make a mess of it, and then that'll be the story, fine. Put two people on camera. Hi, I'm the CEO, and with me is this person who is, obviously very francophone. And we're here to talk about this horrible situation. He speaks in English. The other person speaks in French. They go back and forth. This would have been a non-issue. It's just astonishing to me that there were options that were easily doable, in my view, that didn't happen. The other thing we have to keep in mind, or I think recognize, is it wasn't just this one thing. This wasn't the firing offense that ended his career. This is the latest in a series of failures that go back at least to that speech in Montreal that was completely in English, and then had the audacity afterwards to basically say, I've lived in Montreal for over a decade, and I've never had to speak French. And that's the great thing about Montreal. Not his exact words, but that was the crux of it. It's a testament to Montreal that I haven't had to learn to speak French. That was so bloody tone deaf. And at that time, there was the commitment made to, I've been studying the language and I vow that I will get better at it and I will make some effort here. Clearly, that didn't happen. He's either incapable of getting better at French or just didn't put the hours in to do it. And finally, I think the board said, this guy has become now a substantive liability to our brand, and he's got to go.
Yeah, I wonder whether or not this would have happened if it had been another airline. If it were WestJet or some other larger corporation, we're in the same boat, Lindsay, here in Canada. Would we have the same expectation? Because culturally, I think historically, we still think of Air Canada a different way than we think of some of the other brands based on its roots and its foundation and its originate as a crown corporation. I just wonder whether or not we bring a lot of baggage to this conversation from that perspective.
For sure. Like Bob said, there were expectations on this particular CEO. There were expectations on this particular board to defend the communications team. I think there's some excellent practitioners within both of those airline organizations. And as we all know, you can't lead the CEO to water necessarily. They have to. They're an autonomous entity that's leading the organization. They hear advice, but why they're in the seat is they're supposed to hear all their advice and then make the right and best, highest decision. So picking up on one point you made earlier, which I'd love to dwell on, and then I'll answer your WestJet question. The HR executive that has comms underneath, I'm not going to speak for that particular organization. And how it's structured, because I don't know it intimately enough. What I do know is that you should have communications at the senior executive table as its own entity for an organization of that size, full stop. And over and over and over again, I had a, kind of this blissful moment during COVID where it's like, they're getting it. Organizations are getting it. Right, because communications rose to the top. They were at the issues management table during COVID, and it was like, surely companies now are going to vacuum them in, and we're going to see, chief comms officers finally having a voice, and it's receded again. And I just, to anyone listening this, I heed warning. And also opportunity. Your organization will be stronger if you have a CCO beside you, someone you trust. Back to the WestJet question. No, I don't think they would have been slammed as hard as Air Canada because, as I was saying, that the great observations that Bob and Anne-Marie made about the history there. However, still, if there are French pilots, taking off from French land and territory and community, where the a good deal of passengers will be French speaking. Tone, know your audience and who you're speaking to. It's simple and it's the right thing to do. Remember too, though, and this has happened in Canada in different peaks and troughs. I think we just happen to be in a peak right now where acknowledgement of Quebec issues and Canadian unity is at a high. Right. And that means it's extra sensitive. So I don't know where we were in that moment of time. I'm sorry. When Bob Ray was speaking, but it feels extra acute right now.
Yeah, well, for sure. And I think that's, there's a lot of sensitivity, and the political weaponization of the language in Quebec right now is rather opportunistic. There's no question about it. Over the weekend, the music community here in Canada gathered for the Junos. And for me, it's always been kind of that's nice. And to see who shows up. Monday morning, the headline was the Prime Minister was there giving the Lifetime Achievement Award to Joni Mitchell. I thought it was interesting, Bob. I heard more clips from the Prime Minister. I heard nothing on the radio in terms of what Joni Mitchell might have said or did or anything else. I don't even know if she spoke. I mean, I'm just taking it from the radio version of the coverage. But boy, he got a lot of good earned media, so it was a pretty good weekend for the Prime Minister in that setting, away from all of the nonsense around tariffs and everything else that was going on.
Sure was a smart play by him to not only be there, but to be there specifically to honor such a Canadian icon as Joni Mitchell. And to have some genuine fun with it while he was at it as well. In the opening monologue, the host, whose name has just flown out of my head, but
May Martin.
they said,
Martin.
May Martin, thank you. They said, really stoked to have my parents here tonight as well. And the camera cuts to the audience, and it's Carney and Joni Mitchell. So
yeah.
he was playing along with it well. A great event for him to be part of and present for. And it came at a time when there's been a lot of discussion within the music community about how once careers really take off, then the big stars get too busy to come back for the Junos. Mm-hmm. And they talked about Drake and The Weeknd and one or two others who, and it's partly just the fact of life of their career stage and the demands and commitments that have been made that, can't be moved, can't be changed, that sort of thing. But then there's Michael Bublé, who always seems to be able to have time to not only be there, but to come and host the damn thing. So Carney's presence at this was wise given that background discussion underway as well.
Well, even in the aftermath, though, Anne-Marie, there was more conversation about who didn't show up as well, and whether or not that was a slight or whether it was relevant or not. So against that backdrop, having the Prime Minister there, having Joni Mitchell there, and Bob points out, Rush makes an appearance, which kind of emphasized, oh yeah, we be Canadian. It was just kind of a cool thing to see, but I just wonder whether or not people are offended after the fact that Bieber didn't show or Drake didn't show. I don't know.
I think they forgot about it, frankly, because I have thought about the Junos way more than I have in previous years. But people were talking beforehand about who wasn't coming and how dare they, and they're always slighting the Junos. So there was a lot of discussion. But I think once the Junos happened, I lost track and didn't hear any criticism about who didn't show. And there was just so many intriguing, especially kind of from a communication standpoint, things that happened at it. And Carney's appearance was top for me in that was a brilliant choice. And I think that his comms team keep making great choices for him to really show Canadians his personality, which is becoming more and more endearing. You can't help but endear him. He was when May introduced them as as parents. It was just cut to them, and and he started blowing kisses. He had to nudge Joni to say tell her what was happening, because she had such a serious face on. But she spoke very briefly, but she sang for the first time in Canada, I think since 2003 or 13, like a long time. She hasn't sung in Canada. So she did sing. That was brilliant. It was brilliant things. The Drake videoed his video. So he hasn't appeared. If you know that he's had a long-standing feud with the Junos, and he was doing a tribute to Nelly Furtado, and it was a great tribute. He had to throw in his stupid little dig, but it was brief. So I tolerated because it was brief, mention about how they've snubbed him. But I think we'll probably see Drake maybe next year, or, I think that was a turning point. Some good communication effort there as well. So I think overall, their ratings probably went up, and certainly the next day people were talking about it a lot. I still am seeing clips of Carney, because he did stay. He didn't just come in and do a speech. He did a great speech. He stayed, and he was on stage, and he was sort of singing, I think, and kibitzing, and seemed to really benefit from that. People really, he was treated like a rock star there. So just like the rest of them.
Well, you begin to wonder, though, Lindsay, do you want some sandpaper in the aftermath of the conversation about an event like that? Just because then there's a debatable. I mean, at least there's some kind of issue to chew on, whether Drake showed up or Bieber showed up. I remember one year, this is a long time ago, Gordon Lightfoot wins another Juno Award, and I think it was his 14th Juno Award, and whatever period of time over a decade. I remember him getting up to this podium, and whoever it was hands him the trophy, and he looks at it and says, "Fine, like I needed another one of these." And it was just off the cuff.
Gordon.
That's what he said. But that's all people talked. Everybody expected Gordon Lightfoot to win, but of course, as soon as that came out of his mouth, what do you do? Yeah. And we get offended on our own behalf as Canadians because somehow we're diminishing our Canadian artists. So we're a funny crew when it comes to stuff like this.
We are so fickle. We're so fickle. I love that in the extracurricular efforts that Carney and Polyev are doing right now to get content to promote on their channels and get the headlines in different parts of the media cycle. We've got our Prime Minister going to the Junos and a heated rivalry launch, and then we've got Polyev going on Joe Rogan. It's such an interesting contrast, but it also goes to who's watching these things and who their audiences are. And I bet there isn't much crossover between audience. Really, I could be wrong, but I can't imagine there's much crossover. I went down a bit of a rabbit hole on Canadiana and the Junos, and there was this really interesting interview with Katie Lang from, I don't know, Choose a Year. And she made this observation about how Canadians are Canadian artists are sometimes kind of weird. And she was talking about herself, but she was saying, without this weirdness of Canada, maybe I would never have even made it. Right. And I think for her anyway, that's a likely observation, but it may so be true for, the hip never made it in the States, though they're like religion here. At Celine Dion, I don't know, like a unique once in a lifetime voice, but also kind of a quirky, interesting story that's very Canadian. Joni Mitchell, Neil Young, all those guys would rise to the top. Rush, I will let Bob talk to. There is something interesting about Canadian musicality, and I love when the big stars come home because it just shows that the roots are very important to them. And I don't know. I'm kind of cheesy that way when it comes to the Junos. I like the community of no matter how big or kind of niche you are as an artist, you're in the same room.
And that's the beauty of Rush's, first of all, surprise appearance, kicking the thing off that didn't leak anywhere. I didn't hear a whit that was in the works at all. So it was a holy crap moment when they're kicking the thing off. But also really, really, really perfect for them. I mean, Lindsay, talk about a band that, like, on paper doesn't make sense to become global superstars, right? Given who they were and the kinds of music that they've done over their career, but especially now with the loss of Neil Peart and the decision for Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson to go back out on the road with a new drummer to debut that at the Juno Awards that helped launch them in the first place, the successes that they had there, and just to really, pin a ribbon on their Canadian roots was tremendous, I thought. And also not just with Annika Niles on drums as a new face, but they had a fourth member, a keyboard player with them as well. So what a perfect place to give the world a first look at this new lineup, this new arrangement before they actually hit the road with their tour. I just thought it was absolutely brilliantly done.
The strength of
very few.
Yeah, I was going to say what's interesting about the Rush brand is that they never really had a number one record or a number one album, but they are an international success, and you don't have to go very far to find a Rush fan. So you didn't need to be the top of the chart to have that level of success. And I think, to your point, Lindsay, that's kind of at the heart of the pluckiness of a lot of the Canadian music industry.
A lot of it. And we've got these stars that come out of the ether and change the industry at the right moment in time. Like, talk about Joni Mitchell. I don't know an artist who doesn't point to her as a mentor and role model. Rush, like I hate that band for one reason only, and that's because my brother used to wake me up with electric guitar riffs in high school playing Rush songs, and it's like, it's just a thing. But listening to Rush fans talk about Rush is like, you can't, like, Bob could easily spend about 5 segments, I'm sure, talking about Rush, happily so. And I, like Anne-Marie and I, would love listening to it, just because of the enthusiasm. You know what I mean? It's these Canadian artists are, they become part of our bones, and it's in the water. And there's something very still, you can't get that in the States. You just can't get it.
Yeah, well, and we would have to invite John Wright to that conversation with Bob Reid to engage in Rush. So he's the number one Geddy Lee fan. Okay, well, let's leave it there. That was fun. Good of you to join us. Lindsay Broadhead, Bob Reid, Anne-Marie Aikins. They are our cast, our comms and strategy team, and we drop in every couple of weeks and take the communications angle on the stories of the week and the stories of the day right here on Now and Next. I'm Dave Trafford. Enjoy your week.